The world saw a blind girl. She showed them a musician they'd never forget. Who let her in here? The words weren't loud, but in that quiet room, they echoed like a slap. Heads turned, a few chuckles followed. Nothing wild, just enough to sting. 12-year-old Jamila Robins paused mid-step. Her fingers tightened slightly around the arm of the assistant guiding her toward the piano. She didn't stop walking. She didn't flinch. But she heard him. Victor Lang, the man with the silver cufflinks and the sharp suit. A concert pianist with more trophies than friends. He stood near the Steinway, arms folded, one brow cocked high like he smelled something sour. "We're running a music camp, not a charity," he added, voice low but pointed. Some of the other kids laughed again, not because it was funny, but because they didn't want to be the ones he turned on next. Jamila didn't laugh. Of course not. She just walked to the bench. She found the edge with her knee, sat down slowly, and placed her hands gently in her lap. She waited. The room, for a moment, didn't know what to do. One of the counselors tried to speak up, but Lang raised a hand. No. Let her play," he said, with a smirk so thin it could cut glass. "I want to hear what raw potential sounds like." She didn't ask what that meant. She didn't ask for kindness, either. Jamila Robins never had the luxury of expecting kindness. She simply reached forward, fingers outstretched, brushing the ivory keys like she was greeting old friends. And then, nothing. Not yet. Just breath. Calm. 1, 2. She was waiting for the room to settle, for the whispers to die down, for the silence to become whole. But just before she played, the boy sitting closest to her, tall, blonde, probably from somewhere expensive, leaned over to the girl next to him and whispered, "Maybe she thinks she's Ray Charles or something." Jamila heard that too. She always heard everything. She'd learned early in life that when your eyes didn't work, your ears had to work double. And they did. But she never snapped back, never threw words around like stones. That was never her way, because she knew something they didn't, something not even Victor Lang knew. They thought she came here hoping for attention. They thought she wanted to prove something, but Jamila didn't come for them. She came for her, for the keys, for the music, for the place inside her that only woke up when her fingers started to move. But if they thought she wouldn't answer back, they didn't know who they were dealing with. The first time Jamila touched a piano, she was 4 years old. It was an old upright tucked in the corner of her grandmother's living room. Scratched, chipped, and missing 3 of the higher keys, but to Jamila, it was magic. Not because it looked fancy, but because of how it sounded. She couldn't see it, but she could feel the smoothness of the wood under her palms, the heaviness of the keys, the slight difference in tone when her tiny hands reached the ones that didn't work anymore. Her grandma, Odessa Robins, was the kind of woman who kept things running with grit and gospel. She'd raised Jamila since the day she came home from the hospital, a tiny baby with quiet eyes and no sight. Her mom had been too young. Her dad? Never in the picture. But Odessa didn't complain. She cooked, cleaned, prayed, and kept the front porch swept like it meant something. And when she noticed Jamila reaching for that piano more than her toys, she didn't brush it off. She pulled up a chair beside her. "Go on," she said. "Touch the notes like they're people. Each one got its own voice." Jamila didn't know what that meant. Not then. But she learned. By 5, she could pick out melodies from her grandma's favorite church songs. By 7, she was playing things she heard on the radio. By 10, a neighbor recorded her playing and posted it online. The video only got a few thousand views, but one of those views happened to be from a former jazz teacher in Cleveland who sent it to someone in Seattle, who passed it to a woman in Philadelphia, who emailed it to the Auburn Music Conservatory in Burlington, Vermont, one of the most selective youth camps in the country. They only took 20 students per year. Jamila was one of them. Odessa didn't have money for flights. She barely had money for groceries. But when the acceptance letter came with a full scholarship and travel covered, she cried harder than she had in a decade. But Jamila? She just smiled and said, "Do they got a real piano?" Odessa laughed, wiping her eyes with the same dish towel she used for everything. "Baby, they probably got more pianos than we got forks." Jamila didn't care about the snow or the buildings or the fact she'd never even left Michigan before. All she wanted was to feel the keys under her hands again. Real ones. Tuned ones that didn't stick when it rained. But Odessa was worried. Not about the music, never that. She was worried about them, the kind of people who say one thing and mean another, who smile with their mouths and slap with their tone. You just stay you, baby girl, she told her at the bus station. They don't gotta see you to hear you. Jamila held that in her chest the whole ride to Vermont. Every bump in the road, every turn, she repeated it to herself like a melody. But what nobody told her was that sometimes the notes get drowned out before you even get to play them. The conservatory didn't smell like home. It smelled like lemon polish, paper, and something expensive she couldn't name. The moment Jamila stepped off the shuttle van and onto the snow-dusted brick path, she felt it. That tightness in the air, like the buildings themselves were watching, judging, waiting to see if she belonged. Jamila Robins, a voice called. She turned her head slightly. A woman with a clipboard and stiff posture approached. Her voice was polite but clipped like someone always checking the clock. That's me, Jamila said softly. The woman's shoes clicked sharply on the pavement as she walked over. I'm Ms. Winslow. Orientation started 15 minutes ago. Let's try not to make a habit of being late. Jamila didn't say anything. Her cane tapped quietly as she followed the sound of Ms. Winslow's heels into the main building. The walls were lined with gold plaques and black and white photos of past prodigies. Kids with perfect posture and perfect teeth holding trophies bigger than their heads. Names she couldn't read, but she could feel the pressure they carried. The other campers were already gathered in the grand hall. It was like a small concert venue. Velvet curtains, polished stage, stadium lights overhead. They sat in rows, all neat and quiet, until Jamila walked in. Heads turned, whispers again. It wasn't loud, but it didn't have to be. She's blind, one voice murmured. I thought this place was for serious players, another whispered. She must be some kind of special case. Jamila's shoulders tensed, but her face stayed calm. Ms. Winslow walked her to an empty seat near the back and said nothing more. After that came the usual introductions. The director gave a long speech about discipline, tradition, and the privilege of being chosen. No jokes, no warmth. Everything felt cold and pressed like a starched shirt. When they broke for lunch, Jamila sat alone. She wasn't expecting anyone to invite her. That wasn't how it worked, not in places like this. But then she heard footsteps. Hey, a voice said, young, nervous. Jamila turned slightly. I'm Elijah, the boy said. You're, Jamila, right? She nodded. Yeah. Cool. You play? She smiled. That's why I'm here. He chuckled, then quickly added, No, I didn't mean, I just meant like, you play what? Classical? Jazz? Both, she said, mostly by ear. Elijah sat down, awkward at first, but then he asked about her favorite songs, and she asked about his. He played cello, came from Pittsburgh. His parents were both music teachers. He had the kind of quiet voice that made people lean in. Jamila didn't say much, but when she did, he listened. It was the first real conversation she'd had since getting there. But even that moment didn't last. Because just as the two of them started laughing over a story about Elijah dropping his bow mid-performance, Victor Lang entered the room, and everything changed. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. Just walked through with a presence like heat. Silent, sharp, and inescapable. He eyed the students like he was measuring them for a race they didn't know they were in yet. When his gaze fell on Jamila, he paused for half a second, then kept walking. But that pause, that glance, it said everything. And the next morning, when Jamila was called to play for the entire group, she knew it wasn't about a lesson. It was a test, one she was never meant to pass. The grand piano sat in the center of the hall like a throne, polished black, perfect lighting, not a fingerprint on it. Jamila stood just a few feet away, waiting for the cue to approach. Her cane rested against the wall behind her. She didn't want it near the piano, didn't want them staring at it, or worse, taking pity. Victor Lang stood to her left, addressing the room. Every student will get a turn this week to perform, he said, voice smooth but tight. But today, we begin with Miss Jamila Robins. Silence. Some eyebrows raised. A few students exchanged looks. No one clapped. Lang's tone was sharp. She'll be opening the week. That's rare. But apparently she's special. He didn't mean it like a compliment. Jamila stepped forward, hands relaxed, shoulders square. Her heart was thumping so hard she swore they could hear it echo in the rafters. She sat. For a second, her fingers hovered over the keys. She felt them, like reading Braille with sound. The weight of middle C, the space between the sharps, the whisper of air above the ivory. Victor crossed his arms, leaned against the side wall. No words, no encouragement, just waiting. Jamila inhaled once, then again, and she began, not loud, not fast, but clear, Claire de Lune, a song older than everyone in the room, and yet somehow hers. Her fingers flowed with a calm that came from years of doing this alone. In the kitchen, in church basements, in half-lit community centers with chipped floors and mismatched chairs. Every note told a story. Soft highs, deep lows. A rhythm that didn't ask for attention, but deserved it. One by one, the whispers died. Phones were lowered, jaws tightened. Even Elijah, who had heard her humming the melody the day before, leaned forward with his eyes wide. No one expected her to be good, certainly not this good. Lang didn't move, not at first. Then somewhere around the halfway point, his foot shifted, just once. A twitch, like something inside him was trying to argue with itself. Jamila didn't see it, but she felt it. The change in the air, the hush of a room that had gone from mocking to mesmerized. She didn't need sight to know when people finally saw her. Her fingers slowed. The final chord hung in the air like a held breath. And then, nothing. No applause, just stillness. And then one clap, then two, then a wave, the whole room. Even Lang didn't stop it. He didn't clap, but he didn't speak either. And that, somehow, meant more. Jamila stood, took one small step back from the piano. She didn't bow. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. But as she walked off stage, cane in hand, she heard someone whisper, this time not mockingly, "She plays like she's seen everything." By dinner, the video had already been shared. Elijah recorded it. Just a short clip, 40 seconds. No filters, no edits. Just Jamila, alone at the piano. In that moment, no one could ignore. He hadn't planned to post it. But when one of the other students said, "No one's going to believe that came from her," he uploaded it to his story. He tagged the conservatory, didn't think much of it, but then it got reposted by a violinist with a blue check mark, then by a music professor in Boston, then by a jazz collective in Dallas. Within hours, it was everywhere. The caption was simple: "She doesn't need eyes to see the music." Jamila didn't find out until the next morning. She woke up to Ms. Winslow knocking on her door. "Pack a bag," she said flatly. "You have an interview in an hour. Wear something clean." Jamila blinked slowly. Interview? Radio. Then a Zoom with a podcast host. Then possibly a news segment, if it works out. "I didn't ask for that," Jamila said. "I know," Winslow replied, already halfway down the hallway. Downstairs, the energy had shifted. Where people used to look past her, they now stared. Not cruelly, not kindly either. More like curiosity mixed with caution. The way people look at something valuable they didn't realize was in the room. Even Lang acknowledged her. Not warmly. But when they passed in the hall, he gave a nod. That was it. But coming from him, it was loud. Later that afternoon, she sat in the library while a host from a New Jersey podcast asked questions about her process, her unique gift, and how it felt to be inspiring. She answered carefully. Soft voice, honest words. But inside, something felt off. She hadn't come here to be a symbol. She came here to play. And now they were turning her into something else, something shiny. They didn't hear her when she walked in. Now they couldn't stop listening. Not because they understood her, but because they wanted to own her moment. After the interviews, Elijah caught up with her outside. He sat beside her on the bench near the frozen fountain. "They're going to talk about this for a while," he said. She nodded. "I know." "You okay with that?" Jamila thought for a long second. "I didn't play to go viral," she said. "I played because they thought I couldn't." Elijah smiled faintly. "Well, they know now." She turned her head. "Do they?" He didn't answer right away, because they both knew the truth. Some people clapped because they heard her. Others clapped because they were surprised she could play at all. It wasn't the same thing. But in a place where the piano had always been a gate, Jamila made it a door. And that couldn't be unseen. 3 days later, Victor Lang asked to speak with her. Not in front of everyone, not during a lesson. He just appeared at the door of the practice room where Jamila had been playing scales, quiet, focused, her fingers floating over the same 3 octaves for nearly an hour. He knocked once. She stopped. "You have a minute?" he asked, voice lower than usual. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. He stepped inside, stood a few feet from the bench. No clipboard, no fancy coat. Just him. "I owe you something," he said. Jamila turned toward the sound of his voice. "An apology?" He exhaled through his nose. "Maybe. I underestimated you." She stayed silent. He tried again. "You're not just good. You're different. You play with space, with patience. Most kids your age rush. You let the music speak." Jamila tilted her head. "You thought I came here for attention." He didn't deny it. "I've seen students chase applause, seen parents push their kids so hard they forget why they started, but you don't play like you're trying to prove anything." "I was," she said. He looked surprised. "I just didn't need to say it," she added. Lang nodded slowly. "You know," he said, "when I was your age, I used to close my eyes during solos, not because I wanted to look deep, but because I was scared of the room." Jamila folded her hands in her lap. "I'm not scared of the room. I can tell." They sat in silence for a beat. Then Lang said, "I'd like to invite you to perform at the closing concert." Jamila didn't move. "I thought those spots were already assigned." "They were, but I'm changing that." "Why?" she asked. He looked directly at her. "Because no one's going to forget this week, and they shouldn't." Jamila said nothing. She didn't smile, but she accepted. The night of the final concert, the hall was full. Students, parents, local press, staff. Some of them still didn't quite know what to make of her. The blind girl from Detroit who didn't say much, but somehow shook the whole program. She wore a simple black dress, no glitter, no fancy earrings. Odessa had picked it out back home and packed it with care. Elijah sat in the front row, cello on his lap, nodding as she passed by. Jamila walked alone to the piano. No guide, just her and the sound of her steps. She sat, took a breath, and this time she didn't play Debussy. She played something of her own, something she'd been writing since her 3rd day there. No sheet music, no explanation. Just rhythm, memory, and feeling stitched together like thread. It started soft, uncertain, then grew. A little gospel, a little jazz, a little echo of Claire de Lune, but bent into her own version. A sound that didn't belong to any one tradition. It belonged to her. When she finished, the silence came again. Not awkward this time, sacred. Then came the standing ovation. But Jamila didn't stand to receive it. She just placed her hands in her lap and breathed. Like everything she'd carried for years had finally landed somewhere that didn't reject it. Afterward, a young girl from another program came up to her, nervous and wide-eyed. "I didn't know someone like me could be like that," she whispered. Jamila smiled for the first time all night. "You already are," she said. Some people think greatness has a look. They think it's loud, flashy, obvious. But sometimes it walks in quietly, wears braids and sneakers, speaks only when needed, and still, it changes the room. So the next time you're underestimated, don't talk louder, play harder. Because brilliance doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to be heard. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that their voice or their gift matters. And if you're facing doubt from the world, remember, you don't need permission to shine, just a place to stand.